All
All
right.
right, my friends, and welcome to another special bonus episode of the Red Delta Project podcast. We're taking a fundamental approach to fitness to give you more power, control, and freedom over your healthy lifestyle. Today's episode is a real treat. I've got my friend and fellow PCC coach, Al Kavadlo here. And Al, for those who haven't been following on social media, just made a massive lifestyle shift where he moved from the Northeast, where I'm from, down to Florida. And I wanted to invite him on to talk about this move because one of the things I've long wanted to explore is the vast importance on how your environment is such a crucial influence in everything health, fitness, and even quality of life. How you eat, how you move, your even relationships to a degree are all heavily influenced by your environment. So Coach Al here, of course, has put himself in a very different environment, going from the Northeast down to Florida. And this is a perfect opportunity to explore exactly how that has impacted everything he's going through. So without further ado, Al, how's it going, man?
Hey, Matt, it's going really good.
Very good.
It's like heaven down here. We're very, very happy so far.
Yeah. I'm from the Northeast as well. You're from New York. I'm from right across the little pond there in Vermont and stuff. And we're talking cold winters, and you're more from an urban environment. Now, where did you move down to? You're in like Central Florida here?
Yeah, I moved to Ocala, which is a place I hadn't even heard of until a little over a year ago.
Wow, holy smokes. That's a big step. It's a big move. Without getting too in the weeds and stuff, like what were some of the things that prompted this move for you?
Well, like yourself, a lot of my business is conducted online. And I can't speak for you, but I know for me that was already the case for a long time, for COVID, but then the COVID stuff accelerated that. And I started doing fewer in-person things and more internet things. And eventually I kind of felt like I had the opportunity to live wherever I wanted because most of my work was being conducted online. And I guess to sum it up as succinctly as I can, I figured why live in such an expensive and crowded and polluted place when I could live somewhere less expensive, relatively speaking. I know people are like, Florida's inexpensive. It's like not exactly inexpensive, but compared to Brooklyn, it's less expensive, at least this part is. And there's certainly a lot more space and a lot more fresh air and a lot more nature and a lot less noise and pollution and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's been a welcome change.
I imagine so. So yeah, we're talking about the importance of environment. Like a lot of times in fitness, we talk about genetics and how genetics are so important. Oh, they're that way because of the genetics and stuff. And some people try to trivialize it, but at the end of the day, we do recognize that a lot of our potential and our ability to do things is driven by a genetic imprint. Because when we talk about genetics, we're not talking about one thing. We're talking about thousands of variables that make us all very much unique. And environment's very much the same way. We are products of our environment. We're talking about thousands of little things in our everyday circumstances that are directly influencing us and our choices that we're making. So what are some of the things that you've noticed about your daily lifestyles that have changed a lot moving down to Florida?
Well, I walk less. That's one thing I miss about New York. And I love New York still. I have family there and friends there, and it has a place in my heart. I'm actually going to be in New York to teach at PCC this fall, so I'll be going back regularly. But yeah, there's definitely a lot less walking here. Unless you make an effort to take a walk, you're just using your car to get around more. But on the flip side, I have a pool here, so I've been getting in the pool just about every day and swimming around a lot. So I'm getting a little bit more energy output that way. So it's a little bit of a give and take.
Fantastic. I like that. What about I know from moving out here to Colorado, like my food environment really changed a lot when I moved to a different place. Have you experienced that to be the case?
Yeah, we generally, eat the same stuff regardless. So I don't think I've changed my diet much, if that's what you mean. But
Mhm.
I've definitely, I'm out in the sun more, which is
Mm.
nice. And I think that can affect your appetite. I think it's easier sometimes for me to eat less during the day in the heat.
Hmm. Hmm. You mentioned how it's a little trickier to walk and stuff like that, and I know what you mean. Coming from a less than urban environment myself, I noticed that like if you wanted to go anywhere, you had to drive. There was nothing in walking distance from where I grew up in Vermont. But so the change environment means that some things get easier to do, other things get more difficult to do. Have you noticed that some things get easier to do in your exercise and your fitness regime?
I mean, I'm someone who's prioritized exercise as a daily part of my life for so long that I feel like no matter what was going on in my life or where I was living, I would find some way to fit it in. But I'm definitely doing, like I said, a little bit more swimming. And, I haven't really got like a place that's like my main go-to training spot here outside of just my backyard. Like, in New York, I had Tompkins Square Park. I had Prospect Park in Brooklyn. I had people I knew who had gyms. I've been so busy setting up my house and setting up my life down here. So I've been doing mostly just like pure body weight stuff, handstands, squats, pistol squats, stuff that I've always done. But I
Mhm.
haven't even been doing as many pull-ups because as people might be shocked to hear this, I haven't even set up a pull-up bar here yet. But I'm going to eventually. But there's other things to do. And there's other places. I did a couple times just, at a playground or whatever, get a
Mhm.
set of pull-ups in here and there.
Yeah.
But but no, I mean it's good. I'm like I said, I'm working out no matter where I am.
Now, one of the things I like about this attitude, and you've talked about this in previous episodes before, is just having this mindset of using the environment and doing what you can with what you have. Because moving like you did to such a different location is such a disruptive, life changing event. And it can take quite a while for the dust to settle. But I know a lot of times people will say, okay, I've done this move. I'm going to put off my exercise and put everything on the back burner until I can get my house settled and I can get my routine set and everything. But you're still just trucking right along and using whatever resources you have available to you. And even though it may not be perfect right now, you're still doing things as you can. Can you speak a little bit about that mindset for us, please?
I mean, I'm just a very repetitive person, for better or worse. I have my habits, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And the same way that most people would take a shower just about every day and make sure they brush their teeth about hopefully twice a day. I'm going to make sure I get a workout in every day, and I'm going to make sure that I'm not putting whatever into my mouth without a little thought behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just been that way for a really long time. And to some people, it's a real effort to do that. And thankfully, I'm at a point in my life where it's just been, what people always say, consistency is everything. I've been consistent for a really long time, so it's easy to stay consistent at this point, even if circumstances around me are in flux.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's something I've noticed over the years of training folks is when you have so much more of a habit drilled in and the behaviors are well ingrained into you, it's kind of almost a bit of a litmus test of what's going to stop you or slow down your momentum. I've known people where seemingly trivial things will come out of nowhere, and it's like the sky is falling, like, oh my gosh, I have to stay and work half an hour more on this project. There's no way I can get a workout in today. Or I've got this sore wrist that's acting up, I can't do any sort of exercise. And other folks like yourself, it's like, well, I just had this major change in my life, all this stuff is going on, but I just keep right on trucking along. And you touched on the idea of it's like who you are at this stage. It's how you just live your life. It's not something that you've integrated as this new thing. It's just the way you do it. So did you reach a point where you felt like, well, maybe I should take a break, or is it just on autopilot for you at this point?
I wouldn't exactly say it's autopilot, but yeah, there has been a lot of consecutive years that I've had without really missing more than a couple of days of exercise. I couldn't say for certain when the last time I took more than maybe a week off from training was, but I probably been like 20 years at this point. So it's just such a, like you said, just a big part of who I am and a big part of my life. But it's definitely different here than it is in New York. In New York, I think there's more uh, exercise just baked into your day-to-day life. Like I was saying, you walk more, there's more stairs, there's more things that you have to be physical in order to do. Something that blew my mind here in Florida is going to the Publix supermarket. And when you walk in, you can grab a shopping cart or you can get like a wheelchair with a basket attached to it. And that's just, I never seen that at a supermarket.
That's right. Yes, you have the Publix supermarkets there in Florida. My parents live about 2 hours from you, and they always talk about Publix and how they go down to Publix and get the.
It's a nice supermarket.
It is,
but that just blew my mind. It's gigantic. You don't have supermarkets of that magnitude very often in places like New York.
Mm-hmm. It's a bit of a culture shock when you move to such a different place like that. Am I right?
Well, it's what I wanted. I was at a point in my life where I was feeling like I wanted more space and I wanted more nature and I wanted a slower, calmer pace of life. We have that here. It's been really great so far.
Oh, that's fantastic, especially for, you're still raising a young family and you have your business that you run. And I always found that when I was in a very, very busy, cramped area, even if it's just a busy room, it's very hard to focus, for me at least, on things that I need to do. Very hard to be on task with anything. I was in a very crowded space a couple of days ago, just lots of people, lots of noise, lots of commotion. And I found it very distracting. Was that the kind of the case now? I mean, just talking to you, it sounds like you've got this slower, more casual way of speaking. And this is a bit of a different Al Kavadlo just talking to you. It's like you're more on a bit more of a chill plane right now. I like this. This is good. This is a very good thing.
I like it too. I guess it's a chicken and an egg thing. Did I come to Florida because I was at this point in my life, or am I at this point in my life because I came to Florida? A little bit of both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I think a lot of times when it comes to fitness in general, we want to change exercise or diet and stuff like that. I think there's often this sense of powerlessness that people get to if they try to make a change for several weeks or even several months. And it just gets to a point where it feels like it's too much. And they're like, what's the point of even trying? I can't make this work. Or it's so much work for so little progress that it feels like I'm swimming uphill. And my experience is oftentimes that's from people battling their environment. Because if you can curate your environment to go in alignment with your objectives and your goals, then it's almost like, oh, it's like falling off a log. It's so much easier right now. So what would you suggest? Like you made this big change. Were you feeling points of frustration or feeling points in your life where it felt like you were putting in a lot and not getting a lot more back that made you move? Or was it more just you wanted to grow in a different area?
I mean, I had a good thing in New York, but things change, and that's part of what makes life beautiful. And for a lot of reasons, this started to become more appealing. And it's just life's very hard to predict. If you had asked me a few years ago if I thought there was a possibility that I was going to up and move to Florida, I would have said it seems very unlikely. I would have thought of all the places that I've traveled to in my life, that maybe somewhere else would have been more appealing to live. But ultimately, when I came to Ocala, it just, it's a unique place, and I wouldn't be surprised if it wound up becoming a place that more people move to in the years ahead.
An up and coming area, as it were.
Perhaps we will see.
Yeah, that was Denver like 5-10 years ago. Everybody was moving to Denver. Now it seems like everybody's leaving Denver and everybody's going out to other places like Bend, Oregon and Montana and stuff. everybody's moving around. But one of the things I think that's very key that you've always had a very strong inner compass about, Coach, was you always had that growth mindset going so strong. Every time you're developing something new, your new products, your new opportunities. I know you just came out with your Old Man Strength program, which I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that as well. It always felt to me like you've had your eye on the horizon of what's next? What do I need to do to continue developing and improving as a person, as an athlete, as a coach? And I think that's one of the reasons why people sometimes get stuck in a set environment, is because they don't have that mindset of looking around and saying, okay, how can I just improve my setup here of what I have around? Have you noticed that's the case for yourself, is always looking to improve things?
It's a blessing and a curse. It keeps you super motivated to keep doing more, but it also sometimes keeps you from ever really being satisfied. And that's part of the difficulty of the human condition, is trying to balance. I mean, ultimately, being totally content and happy and never challenged is not what is best for us. We need to have challenges, and we need to overcome things, and we need to push ourselves. And working out is a very literal example of that. But in a metaphorical way, we need those things in our life also. And that's what makes people stronger. And you asked before about people who have a hard time sticking to a fitness regimen, and how I was able to have a big move happen in my life and still maintain my fitness. And if anything, I think I might be leaner now than when I left New York. So like I said, I'm just sweating so much, and I'm outside in the sun, and I'm just not really eating that much, except maybe a piece of fruit until dinner. And then even at dinner, I'm not eating as huge of a dinner as I used to, because I'm just getting full quick. But anyway, the point I was trying to make is I remember when I was a young man, being, 14 or 15 years old, and having just recently gotten into strength training and working out and wanting to put on muscle, being a skinny kid. I remember reading in a magazine that it can take between 3 and 5 years for somebody to reach their full potential from when they start strength training. And I remember at that time feeling a little bit discouraged, like, oh my God, that's such a long time. How am I possibly going to stay the course and keep doing this for that long? But ultimately, I did, and far beyond that. I think I was nowhere near my full potential 5 years in. If anything, that was a very optimistic, encouraging sort of timeline to have. But the point is, when you think too much about, I got to do this for a really long time, it can be daunting and it can be overwhelming. So the thing is just to take it day to day, and to find stuff stuff that you enjoy, stuff that is entertaining or interesting or stimulating to you in some way. And that's going to keep you coming back to it.
I love that attitude. I love that perspective. And I totally agree with that mindset too, 3 to 5 years. That seems to be a bit of a magic number in a lot of improvements. There was someone, I think it was on a different podcast, but I heard this from someone who was talking about how he's like, I'll take on a hobby, like learning to play the guitar, for 3 to 5 years. And I figure I've got about 75 to 80% of my potential in about 3 to 5 years. And at that point, I reevaluate on whether or not this can really turn into something. Okay, after 3 to 5 years, I'm gotten pretty good at it, better than average for sure. But is this something that I can potentially really take to a high level? Or is it just one of those things I'm always going to be somewhat of a hobbyist with, in which case I can maintain that level and then move on to other things? Have you noticed that to be kind of consistent with fitness in general, or am I just kind of extrapolating here?
No, I think it's fair. I mean, to be fair, people can start to see results a lot sooner than that. But yeah, you have to invest some serious time in something to really see what it's worth. And depending on your age and your perspective, 3 to 5 years can be a really long time, or it can be a relatively short time. But the thing is, no matter where you're at, you're always the youngest you're going to be. So if you want to do something, you should do it now, and not wait and not put it off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So speaking of age and stuff, and it's a very crude stereotype. I grew up thinking that Florida was the land for people when they retire. Like I remember as a kid going down to Sarasota for visiting my grandparents because they retired and moved to Sarasota. Now my parents, they retired, they moved to Sarasota. And there's even jokes out there in the NFL of, yep, Brady retired from, the Patriots and he moved down to Tampa Bay, kind of thing. So it's a crude, stereotype, and certainly not true, of course, across the board. But you moved down to Florida, and now you've got this program, Old Man Strength. And I love this idea of strength into an older age. Can you touch a few points on what went into that program and why you developed it?
Well, a lot of my audience has aged with me over time. I started blogging in 2009 when I was 30 years old, and I'm going to turn 43 soon. And a lot of those people that started following my blog in 2009 and 2010 and 2011 and 2012, a decade later, they're a decade older. They're still following me, and it's been a great ride so far. And I hope we're all still doing this for a long time to come. So a lot of the training that I was putting out in my early 30s, I felt like, and as my personal training clients got older too, I felt like we couldn't and shouldn't do some of those exact regimens anymore. They weren't the most appropriate or helpful thing. So I wanted to put out something that I thought was better. And of course, the name Old Man Strength, a lot of people have correctly pointed out to me that, of course, I'm not old, but it's a catchy name. And when I was a kid, I remember that was a thing, like that dads, like some guy's dad would pick up something really heavy and throw it on his shoulder and walk, and you'd be like, whoa, how did he do that? I don't know, Old Man Strength. So I just thought it was a cool name.
It is a cool name. It's very catchy. I like it a lot. And one of the things I've long told people is that the older you get, the more important it is, more beneficial it is to stay with some sort of strength training. I get pushback sometimes from people who are getting a little older. And these days it's crazy how the perception of age changes. I had a question on my podcast the other day from someone saying, I'm 32. Am I too old to start strength training? And he just kind of, all the other people started roasting him like, 32? Like, that's not old at all. What are you talking about? But you're right about how the perception is like so much of the idealized, physique and workout programs and extreme aspects of our fitness culture seem to be embodied by people in their later teens, 20s, even early 30s. But the fact is that the older we get, the more benefit we get from strength training for a quality of life aspect of it. And I think it's a message that needs to be much stronger in our fitness culture. And I thank you very much for putting out that program to further push that program out there. How have you found that strength training has improved your life as you've gotten older?
Well, so far so good. I'm curious to see in another decade or three if I'm still able to do the things that I'm able to do. But I feel like I'm pretty much capable of doing everything and anything that I did before. The biggest change that I feel as I'm older, and this is what I tend to hear from my clients and other people that I interact with, is it just takes a little longer to recover. So if you want to be smart about it, you have to kind of change your volume accordingly. So I can still have a day or even a week where I hit it really, really hard. But long term, that is going to give you problems as you get to be, in your 40s and beyond. And I imagine it increases. But that said, I can still perform at my best when I need to. And I still look and feel in day-to-day life. I certainly don't feel like an old man at all.
You look
and
great.
I hope, thank you. And I hope that's still the case for a long time to come. I certainly have clients in their 60s who can still do, pull-ups and chin-ups, and in some cases, muscle-ups, and pistol squats and stuff like that. So I know that the potential is there for those skills and strength to still be there for a long time to come.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of weird. I never really resonated with this idea of crossing some sort of a chronological barrier and suddenly being like, oh, I'm too old to be doing this anymore. Or I guess that's just, for me, it's always just been, well, I could do that yesterday, or I could do that last week. Why not keep doing it today? And you just keep going on with it. So it's always been a bit of a curiosity to me about how someone might reach just this milestone or a birthday and be like, well, I'm 40 or I'm 50. I guess that doesn't happen anymore. It's like, but you could do it last week. What changed?
Well, it's a gradual process, it's life gets in the way. Like you said, people have something come up, and then suddenly it's not just been a few days, it's been a few weeks. And
Mhm.
they've also not been taking great care of themselves for those few weeks. And then when they get back to it, it is a little harder. And then maybe they hurt themselves because they don't want to acknowledge that they can't do exactly what they were doing when they left off. And then that compounds itself if it happens enough times.
That makes a lot of sense. That does make a lot of sense. That's a really good way to look at it. Clears up a little bit of the mystery for me. So how have you found, other than recovery, are you doing any sort of different exercises or training as you get older? Or is it pretty much about what you were doing when you were younger, just a little
I'm,
bit of a different programming?
I'm doing less strength training now and a little bit more cardio and a lot more mobility. I'd
Okay.
always done cardio. I'd always done yoga. Those had always been the other things that I did. And strength was my main thing. And now I feel like all three of those are pretty much equal parts of my training at this point.
Are you getting into the running again? You were a marathoner at one point, right?
I did do one marathon once a long time ago, and I don't have any interest in doing that again. But I have been doing some jogging and some running, but more my cardio. I've been jumping rope a lot, and I've been getting in the pool a lot. The tricky thing about running in Florida is the heat, and especially if you're running far, then you got to get back or you got to arrange for someone to pick you up. So I haven't really wanted to go out too far because there was one day that I wound up having to do 6 miles because I ran out three feeling good. Said, let me turn around. About a mile back, I started to say, oh man, I think I might have gone a little too far in this heat. And then I was just like walking slowly for the last half a mile. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get myself into that situation again.
Yeah, it can be a bit of a dicey thing. Do you have like are you near any sort of beaches? I know you're pretty inland, but do you have any beaches you can run on?
We're near the springs. We're not near a beach, but
Mm.
the spring is like the beach without the sand. Basically, it's a natural body of fresh water that you can go swimming in and do all the same things you do at the beach.
Oh,
So we've gone there a
fantastic.
few times. It's been nice. I have in a couple of my YouTube videos, I've had some quick shots of me swimming in a large body of water, and if anyone's seen any of those, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, that's what those are. I was wondering when I was like, where in the world did you find this? Because I always had this image of Florida just being either dry and like kind of dusty or swampland. So I see this like Garden of Eden area you're in. I'm like, where is
Well,
that?
it's kind of like the jungle, basically.
Mhm.
I moved from the concrete jungle to the actual jungle. It's yeah, there's some just natural springs, bodies of water that and some of them they've added some man-made structures around them,
Mhm.
but it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. All right. So you've got running, you've got swimming. I'm going to get you on a bike at some point and we're going to go triathlon.
I have a bike. I did a triathlon actually about
Oh,
10 years
okay.
ago. Yeah, I got that one scratched off my bucket list. But there's actually a biking trail near where I live that I want to go on when it's not quite as hot. I'm probably in the fall. I'm going to go
Mhm.
check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be aware of the temperature and the sun is pretty brutal down there, I imagine.
Yeah, if you're out between maybe noon and 6 p.m. this time of year, it's hot. So if I'm
Mhm.
doing cardio outside, I'm doing it in the morning for sure. And even then, it's still pretty hot.
Yeah. And it's humid in Florida, correct?
Some days, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Out
We
here
this
it's
is this is the
dry.
rainy season, so a lot of the time it's kind of nice in the morning, and then it gradually starts to get more humid, and then you get some rain in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I know this is like, oh God, seriously, I'm listening to a fitness podcast and they're talking about the weather. Dear Lord, like where is this going from? But seriously, dear listener, this is the sort of thing we need to take into
Dear
consideration
listener,
because
please.
he's in Florida. I'm here in Denver, Colorado, which is technically classified as high desert. It gets just as hot here as it does there. It got up to 105 the other day here. And these are environmental considerations. When you become more aware of how your environment influences your fitness, you start to pay attention to these sorts of things because they're not trivial. You know, if you go out, like Al was saying, he was like, he ran 3 miles out, and when he turned back, it was getting hotter, you know, maybe a little humid. It's like, wow, that saps you quick. But out here, like last weekend, we had some pretty cloudy, rainy days out here last weekend. I saw it on the weather report. And I was like, this is great because we don't get that very often. And I went out for like a 3.5 hour bike ride into some pretty tricky terrain out here, purely because I knew the environment was going to be ideal for that type of ride. It was purely based on what is my environment going to be like and how do I best use it. So building, that's what I'm trying to do with this episode, is build an awareness of how your environment influences your abilities. Because when you work in alignment with your environment rather than against it, this whole building muscle and strength and losing weight and stuff becomes so much easier and easier to maintain. But if we're not aware of how the environment influences things, you're constantly fighting everything around you. So that's why I'm really trying to drive this home. Now, you were mentioning swimming quite a bit there, Al. Do you have like a regular swimming regimen, or are you just kind of playing in the pool?
I've just mainly been going back and forth in the pool, and the few times that we've gone out to the springs, I can swim for a longer distance without turning around, which is nice. But even just going back and forth in the pool, my technique's gotten better. I it's a tricky thing when you get better at an activity that you practice a lot because you start thinking, oh, I'm getting in better shape. But you're not really getting in better shape. You're just getting better at that thing. So I hadn't really been swimming much for the last few years, and now I'm doing it again every day. So I'm expending much less energy and feeling much better and faster doing it. But I'm just, my technique's improving. But the thing that you and I are so fortunate to have is that we have really good perspective because we train so many people and we hear from so many people who post comments on our social media pages or who send us emails and tell us their story, or people who we met at workshops or whatever over the years. And it's really helpful to hear from all these people who have similar stories. And obviously everyone is a little unique too, but there's so much overlap and it gives you perspective on your own training. And it's hard for people who just have themselves and maybe their friends don't work out. And that's why people listen to us, because they need somebody to give them a little bit of perspective, because it's a hard thing to get if you're not surrounded by other people in the community.
Oh, that's a very good insight. I never really considered it that way, but you're absolutely right now that I think about it. I've been working with a couple of new clients over the past few days, and they've all kind of had this, like, how in the world do you learn about this stuff? And how do you learn how to apply it? And it's like lots of experience in working with broad ranges of people. And it's just something you kind of pick up on. And it's something I guess I've kind of come to take for granted more than anything else, because you think, well, I know what I know. It's nothing special or unique, but you spend 20, 30 years doing this with a lot of people, and yeah, you get a different perspective on things.
Yeah, I'm often reminded when I do anything that isn't the thing that I'm good at, that I'm not very good at most things. And that's a good, healthy thing to be reminded of. Nobody's good at everything. People need to seek outside consultation about lots of things, and fitness is one of those things. And sometimes I think it's easy for people who are new to the fitness industry to misunderstand the importance that a personal trainer can have and the impact that it can make on a client's life. Because because like you said, it is something that they do and enjoy and know about and kind of take for granted that they have that knowledge.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. Like for me, like you said, you're not fit at everything. You're just fit at that thing. Like I can ride my bike for hours, but if I was in your swimming pool on one end and you're like, swim to the other end, I'd be like, what? You mean way over there? Like I can't swim for
So you
anything.
need to do the triathlon, it sounds like.
Exactly. I swim well enough that I don't drown. I always say swimming to
Well,
me
that's
is
the
just
first, yeah,
surviving in the water. That's swimming to me. But
that's the
yeah, if
first
I
level.
did a couple laps in that pool, it would totally kick my butt because I'm not in shape for that kind of swimming. And it's a good example of exactly that, of going into new things and trying different stuff and looking for those opportunities in new environments.
It's certainly more technical than running. And I think biking is probably a bit more technical than running as well. Although running certainly has some technique to it, and some people have pretty bad technique, unfortunately. It seems it's one of those things that people think, oh, I should just be able to run because that's just something people can do. But their body might not be in the best, you know, shape to just dive right in and start doing that. So then they get bad habits going.
Yeah, yeah. And I find that to be the case, especially with calisthenics too, where people will like, oh, I know how to do push-ups. I know how to
Oh
do
my
squats. I've been
God.
doing it forever. And then I'm like, well, let's take a look and change a few things and stuff. And they're like, oh, I didn't really know how to do push-ups, I guess. And I always tell them, no, you weren't doing it wrong. It's just, we're upgrading you right now. But that's the value of a coach, is they've seen further than you can see with your limited perspective. So they can bring more to the table for you.
Yeah, no, I'm amazed. I'm sure you experienced this too, because I know you make a lot of, videos of yourself and take photos for your books and stuff, where you take a picture of a move like a push-up that you've done a million times. You're looking like, no, my form looks bad. I can't. I got to redo this more. And it's like, how many push-ups have you done? And it's still hard to get it just right.
Oh, I know it. It's very humbling. It's like you go from, I totally know what I'm doing, I've got this mastered, to, my gosh, am I ever going to get this thing right? Am I ever going to be able to understand this? And you kind of
Yeah.
almost go in ebbs and flows a little bit, but it is a very different perspective for the same thing. It's amazing.
The best thing that ever happened to my exercise technique was posting stuff online and having people be rude to me. Because it's really, I mean, you want to take things with a grain of salt, but you also, sometimes people, when they don't know you, will really give you a fresh, objective viewpoint. And other times they're just being mean for no reason. But it's, if you really can, if your skin is thick enough to not get too hurt by it, you
Mm-hmm.
really can get a lot of feedback by, by posting your stuff online. And if you're listening to it, it'll hopefully make you a little bit better, or it will discourage it. It's a delicate balance, isn't it?
Yeah. You've always seemed to be a very strong emotional rock in that, because your face is everywhere. You've been the face of progressive calisthenics, along with the whole Dragon Door team and your brother Danny and stuff, for so many years now, that you get a lot of feedback from the internet, of course, and you've always seemed to just have a smile on your face and just keep on trucking forward. You're one of the strongest coaches emotionally that I've ever found, which is why I always enjoy watching your stuff, because nothing seems to rock your world,
Well, I save
and
my drama for my real life. Online, there's no reason to conduct yourself like that.
for sure. And you say that like it's so easy, but what kind of advice, like with other people, we'll finish up on this, of people just, they post even a picture of, look, I'm here enjoying my birthday party, and they get nasty comments. What kind of advice would you give to someone who can just have a little bit more emotional resiliency?
Well, first, if you wouldn't take someone's compliment very seriously, you shouldn't take their criticism very seriously either. People tend to overvalue negative criticism and undervalue when someone actually gives them positivity.
I like
So
that a lot.
you just have to, and then sometimes you just have to, in the beginning, you do have to get hurt a little bit. sometimes in order to get that thick skin. The same way your skin on your hands has to get torn up when you're learning pull-ups if you have never done that before, and then you get calluses, and then it can handle it. That has to happen too emotionally, I suppose, as well. Yeah, the thing with the internet is anyone who like actually types something out and presses send, like more thought is behind that, or should be behind that, than just blurting something out rudely in a conversation. So I think it should be easier to conduct yourself online the way that you would like to conduct yourself. I guess that's what I'll say about my online persona. I'm very flattered that you feel that way. My online persona is the projection of how I would like to actually be in the real world. So I'm not quite that level-headed all the time in real life.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point to finish off with, because these days, of course, our environment is more than just the stuff around us physically. It's also what we're exposing our minds to online and in media and stuff. It's the digital environment that we expose ourselves to. And I feel like we're just not very, because it's such a new thing, that we're not very good at curating it and controlling it and being able to manage it. Like, I'll clean my apartment, 5 times in a week, making sure everything's spotless, but then go onto my social media feed and there's all sorts of trash and junk and stuff that's not good for me to hear. And I won't think to unfollow those people or to block certain individuals. So there's trash in the digital environment, even if we have our physical environment pristine.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of toxic stuff online. You've got to be, if you are going to look at it, you at least the same way you have to look at criticism of yourself. You just have to not get too attached to it. It makes me sad that there's so much extremism in media, and so little room for people to have a more nuanced conversation that's somewhere in the middle of things. Because everybody just doesn't want to hear the other side out at all.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people. Not enough people really want to listen and do what is right for everybody. People just want to show the other side that they're wrong.
Too much negativity. I thank you for being a very strong and positive influence out there, Al. You're leading by such a strong example, and I just think it's such a unique thing, and there needs to be a lot more of it. Please, folks, check out all of Al's resources down below. Is linked down below in the description. And Al,
Matt, you're doing the same thing. It's very kind of you to say all of that to me, but you're an incredibly positive and helpful source of useful information, and the world is better for having you in it.
Very good. Thank you so much for your time here, Al. It's much appreciated. Again, everybody, check out Al's new program, Old Man Strength, down below in the description. Anything else that you'd like to share and make sure people check out as well, Al?
Hey, we're working out. If you listen this far, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Fantastic. And thank you very much for listening as well. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Till then, be fit and live free.